Hey everybody. Last year we did a 7-week Bible study vlog, and we looked at how long the Israelites were in the land of Egypt. And we saw that they were in Egypt for only 215 years and not 400 years or 430 years, as is also commonly taught. Today we just want to do a quick follow-up and look at a few of the scriptures that we didn't look at in that series. And I'll provide a link in the description of this video to the YouTube playlist of the old series if you'd like to check that out. But it won't really be necessary for what we're going to do today. Today we just want to consider the three most commonly taught lengths of time for the stay in Egypt: 215 years, 400 years, and 430 years, and show from the scriptures how we can eliminate 400 and 430 years as possibilities. So the first thing we want to do is look in Genesis chapter 46. Genesis 46. So if you'd like to turn there. Genesis 46, starting in verse 8. It says, "Now these were the names of the children of Israel, Jacob and his sons, who went to Egypt." And then it starts listing some of the people that went into Egypt. We know that it was less than 100 people that went into Egypt. And if we look down in verse 11, it says the sons of Levi were Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. So we see that Kohath is listed among those that entered Egypt. So now what we want to do is we want to look at the genealogy of Moses in Exodus chapter 6. So we'll go to Exodus chapter 6. And sometimes people will dismiss the genealogies. They'll say that there's gaps in them, like in Matthew chapter 1, the genealogy of Jesus. But, well, you can look at it yourself here and see what you think. So Exodus chapter 6, starting in verse 16. And this is the genealogy of Moses. It says, these are the names, Exodus chapter 6, verse 16. These are the names of the sons of Levi according to their generations: Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. So it lists the three sons of Levi, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. And then it says, at the end of verse 16, he says, and the years of the life of Levi were 137. So it gives his three sons, and it tells how long Levi lived. And then it gives the sons of Gershon, gives two of them. And then in verse 18 it says, and the sons of Kohath were Amram. And then it lists 1, 2, 3 more. So it lists four sons of Kohath, and Amram, it's the first one that lists. And then it tells how long Kohath lived. It says, and the years of the life of Kohath were 133 years. So we saw earlier in Genesis 46 that Kohath entered Egypt. So just assuming the maximum amount of time possible in Egypt, we'll say that Kohath had just been born. So he spent all 133 years of his life in Egypt. And then we look down in okay, well, we saw that Amram was the son of Kohath, and then we look down in verse 20, and it says, now Amram took for himself Jochebed, his wife's sister, or his father's sister, as wife, and she bore him Aaron and Moses. And the years of the life of Amram were 137. So now we're told that Amram lived 137 years. So we already saw that Kohath lived to be 133. And so if he was brought into Egypt when he was just after he was born, it would be a maximum of 133 years. And now let's assume that if Kohath and his wife had Amram, just say at the end of his 133 years, not likely, but just to see the maximum possible, then we would say, okay, then Amram was born after 133 years in Egypt, and we're told in verse 20 that Amram lived to be 137 years old. So if we add 133, the whole life of Kohath, who entered Egypt, to the whole life of Amram, 137 years, we have 270 years. So now let's assume that Amram and Jochebed had Moses just before Amram died. So we know that Moses was 80 years old at the time of the Exodus. So if we add the 270 to 80, we have 350 years. So we have a point where they entered Egypt and a point where they left Egypt. And we have a maximum of 350 years. And we saw previously in our series that we did before that it was actually 215. But just from these numbers alone, we can see that 350 years is the maximum according to the genealogy of Moses that's listed here in Exodus chapter 6. And it's interesting that the ages given are just for Levi and for Kohath and for Amram. And it's interesting. It doesn't look like there's any gaps there. It says the son of. So, but you can decide that for yourself. So that was just it. I just wanted to share that with you. So God bless.